911, what are you reporting?
I got a strange going on out here. Something just killed my dog.
Something killed your dog?
My dog went flying through the air over the tree. I don't know how it did it.
Okay.
Damn it, I'm really confused. All I saw was my dog coming over the fence, and he was dead when she hit the ground. I didn't see any cars. All I saw was my dog coming over the fence.
What are you reporting?
We got someone or something crawling around out here.
Did you see what it was?
Catch it if I was going to chase it, but whatever it was standing up. I'm out here looking through the window now and I don't see anything. I don't want to go outside. Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
Dia!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
Hey guys, and welcome to tonight's episode of Sasquatch Odyssey. Thank you guys, as always, for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us for the show. As always, I want to start the show by inviting you. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, please shoot me an email. You get me at brian@sasquatchodyssey.net. We've got a great guest lined up for you tonight. We've got Carter Buschardt on the show. Carter is an author. He's a researcher. He's written the book Sasquatch Evidence of an Enigma, and he's working on a second book, which we'll talk about tonight. We'll get to Carter in a moment, but before we get started with that, I just want to give a shout out to my buddy Wes Germer over at Sasquatch Chronicles. Now you're probably saying, Brian, what the hell are you doing talking about Sasquatch Chronicles and Wes Germer on your show? Wes took the time to listen to my show, give me feedback. He's been gracious enough to spend time on the phone with me, helping me solve some of the audio issues that you guys have clearly, if you've listened to the show, you knew I've had some audio issues on some of the previous episodes. Wes recommended the board that he uses to record his show, and I'm now using that board to record this intro. So I just felt compelled to give him the credit that I know he doesn't feel like he deserves, but he frankly does deserve. So thanks, Wes. You know what you've done for me and the show, and I can't thank you enough, man. I appreciate it. Now, you guys came here for the encounters. You came here for the stories, so we're going to get over to our guest tonight and get the show started. Welcome to the show, Carter.
Wait, thanks a lot, Brian. This is a nice chilly morning to be inside, at least here in Missouri, doing a podcast. So it's good to meet you and talk to you. So.
Absolutely, man. The pleasure's mine, and I'm so thankful for the time you've given us this morning. So I want to sort of get into what got you into the subject. I know you've written books on the subject and you've done a lot of research over the years. So take the audience back and take me back to what got you interested in this subject and sort of take us back there and start at the beginning and sort of walk us into what happened to you.
All right, gladly. Well, back in the 60s and 70s, they had the Leonard Nimoy show, In Search Of, and that was my first exposure to Sasquatch. And many, many people watched that show, and that was actually right after the Patterson-Gimlin film had come out. And, of course, everybody was busy poo-pooing that and calling it a fake and a hoax and all that. So that was my first exposure to it. I didn't have an experience until probably 2012, 13, somewhere in there, here in Missouri. And I was hooked. I kind of knew there was something going on. Actually, my wife and I had taken a vacation to Washington State, and I don't know if you're familiar with the geocache. I don't even know if that craze is still going on now, where people, bury things and put them in boxes, then people go all over the world and find these boxes, and they take something out, put something in. And we actually found one of these geocache boxes in Washington State, and I actually thought I found a drug stash, because it was one of those ammo boxes that was chained to a tree. And so I went ahead and opened it, was not even thinking of a geocache anyway. I found a card from a guy, who was a Bigfoot researcher in Washington State. And I thought, well, that is cool and very coincidental because I've been wanting to get into it. And so that's what I did, was contact the guy, and he put me in touch with a guy in Missouri that was running expeditions and stuff like that. I went on to one expedition, and I was hooked. I became an investigator, and that was probably 2011, 12, 13, somewhere in there. And I've been eating, sleeping, and drinking this stuff ever since.
It tends to have that effect on people, right?
Yeah, it does. And you spend too much time on the gasoline and equipment and time away from family and stuff like that. But it's paying off in dividends that I was not even remotely expecting as far as experience goes in talking to people who have had these experiences. And it's mind blowing. And over the years, the events have become more far out, esoteric, metaphysical, if you wish, paranormal type things, and it's sort of taking things over because we're at a dead end with traditional science. So it's just fascinating. I eat, sleep, and drink this every night. It's just ridiculous. I need to get some stuff done in the house, but I can't do it because I'm hooked.
I'm sort of the way with the podcast, man, because I started this show just to give people a space to come on and tell their encounter stories, because I believe that's one of the most important things that we have. I like you, agree that we're sort of at that point in we can only collect so many foot castings and sounds recorded and blob squatch videos. I believe the real evidence at this point lies in the anecdotal but eyewitness accounts of what these people are seeing over and over and over again across the country and literally around the world. So I created this show to give people that platform to come on and share those stories, because frankly, a lot of the encounters that people are having out there are not the friendly forest giants that they meet and go pick flowers with and walk hand in hand in the woods. People are having some pretty traumatic experiences with these things. And there's a lot of PTSD that comes along with that, and people are dealing with that, and they have no outlet. They talk to the people in their families and their friends and their coworkers, and they tell them the stories, and they think they're crazy, and I think it's important to have a space for people to come and share those encounters and sort of have that cathartic moment of getting it off their chest and sharing it with people and not feeling crazy in the process. So I too I'm fascinated by the encounter stories, and I love listening to people, and the podcast takes up way too much of my time. But it's a labor of love. I love doing it. I love putting it out there because I think it's really, really important. So I know you got into the research part of it, and I want to talk to you about some of the research that you've done and some of the people that you've talked to and some of the stories you've heard over the years. But what about your personal encounters with these things? What kind of personal encounters and experiences have you had with Sasquatch during your time researching?
2013 or 14, I can't recall. And there was two groups of us. The group was with me, and another group had left, and they were going to follow a circuitous route and go take a long way around the conservation area. We were going to meet back at a stop. Well, they got lost, and we were in and out of radio contact with them. So I kept scanning the woods with my thermal camera. But I quit recording because it was taking up too much battery, and I was really spending all my time looking for them because they were inexperienced and had limited radio contact. So when I was looking, I saw this big heat signature coming around the corner, and I went, "Oh, thank God, here they are finally." So I quit the recording, and walking with them, and it wasn't them. It was a Sasquatch, probably 7.5, 8 feet tall, huge thing. And it took two steps. I don't think it saw us because we were in the dark. It was about 11 o'clock at night. We were in the dark, just sitting there kind of being quiet, listening for them. And this creature just came around the corner, and I'm going, "Oh, my God." And I was about 75, 100 feet away. And it took 2 steps, and on the 3rd step, it just vanished. Just poof. It was like somebody had blown a Sasquatch cigarette smoke ring. It was, the heat signature was all there. I saw its legs, its arms moving, and the whole thing. And on that 3rd step, when it hit down right across this fire trail, it just vanished. And I was with, I'll say, some very closed-minded people at the time. So I said something to one person who I trusted. I said, "You didn't believe what I saw anyway." And so we recreated it, and it was, probably closer to 8 feet tall. And I saw it. I didn't record it, and I was just watching it. And it was that was the time that I decided that I was beating my head against the wall as far as the dumb ape in the woods concept. That went out the window, and I've never looked back. It was just a fantastical event for me. And so this area that I went is also an area that I use as a research area. I can almost assure myself of something, whether it's a structure or conversation or communication of some type with these beings. I want to go there. It's, and it sounds a little far-fetched, but they know me. I think they know a couple of people who have been there before and had some encounters, which were both published reports. And they know it. And there's a lot of interaction. So that was the launching pad for me deciding that there's much, much, much more to these beings than the road crossing and the dumb ape in the woods. So
yeah, I'm very intrigued by that, Carter, because I've had lots of conversations with lots of people, and people seem to be in one camp or the other. It's either the big dumb ape that runs around in the woods that smacks trees and screams, or it's this sort of interdimensional alien, way more to it, mind speak type of situation. Right? I just had two very opposing interviews recently. I talked to Ron Moorhead, who recorded the Sierra Sounds back in the 70s. And Ron he takes a very metaphysical sort of approach to his belief on what these creatures are. He believes they're way more than just the big dumb ape. He's experienced some things up there at the Sierra camp over the years that he just can't explain. And he believes that it has more to do with quantum science and the quantum Bigfoot and that kind of thing. And then I just interviewed Dr. Jeff Meldrum for this past week's show. And Dr. Meldrum is a straightforward, cut and dry, scientific, it's evidence. Here's what the evidence tells me. This is what I believe. This is my hypothesis based on the evidence. Mm-hmm. And I feel like the truth lies somewhere in between the two. And I don't know what it is, but I'm very intrigued by that. I mean, clearly you had this experience that this being is there and then it's gone. Now, could there be some sort of physical way that happened and something that's more physically explainable than it just disappeared? I mean, what were you thinking at the time? And now that you've had time to digest it, I mean, what do you think was going on? What do you think happened during that encounter?
Well, I truly believe, first, Ron Moorhead did some commentary for my book. And so he and I have had some good conversations about that, and Meldrum is a scientist cut and dried. If it can't be, proven with a body on a slab, then I'm just going to have to say that it's scientific in nature and it's a physical being. I think it's something in between. I think they are a physical creature, but they may have other attributes that we just cannot comprehend. Because when I saw that happen, and I've interviewed at least 300 witnesses for BFRO. I've had almost 100 reports published and counting. And when you talk to that many people, they're telling you their story, and then after they've told you what you think is the end of their story, they're going to go, oh, here's something you won't believe. And then they get to the good stuff, you know.
I've experienced that personally many times in interviews. That once the mic goes off is usually when I get the real story.
Yeah, well, I take it all into consideration, and so my whole thing, and I'm trying to be as much of a witness advocate as I can. The witnesses are key to this stuff, and the stuff that is being sanitized and removed from reports by large reporting groups is doing research, because their stuff, if they don't believe it, they just take it out. And so you're left with just bits and pieces. It's like a detective going to a crime scene with a preconceived notion of how things are, and I know you saw this, but you didn't really see that. This is what happened. And you can't do research that way. These people are telling you things. They're not related. They don't want anything. They don't want any money. They don't want any notoriety, any publicity. They want nothing. They just want to have someone, like you were talking earlier, tell the story and listen with an open mind. People are having cathartic, life-altering events when they come face-to-face with creatures, and when I was putting the book together, I was just going, oh, my gosh, these people are, some of them are devastated. And so I listen to everything, and I believe some of it, but I consider almost all of it. And after interviewing hundreds and hundreds of people, you kind of come to an area where you go, okay, this is more likely than this, but you can't throw anything out because we don't know anything. The only people that know anything are the government and the forest companies and the paper companies, the ones that are keeping secrets, and they're the only ones that know. And so we have to consider everything until they come clean and tell us what's going on. It's just pure and simple.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's always my approach on my show is when somebody comes on, I try not to have guests on that I don't believe, honestly, because I've talked to people and I don't believe their story. It doesn't make sense to me, and if it doesn't make sense to me, then I try. But that's only happened maybe one time since I've been doing the show, frankly, somebody that I just refused to put their interview on. Everybody else, I believe that they've had some type of experience, right?
Yeah.
So they've either had an experience, and then I think people tend to somewhat embellish stories at times, but far more often, and it happens when the mic goes off, people come on and tell the story about a Sasquatch encounter, and then there was this other thing with the lights, or there was this other thing that happened in conjunction with that's a little more woo, right? The quote, air quote, woo in the Bigfoot community. And they leave it out purposely during the interview, and I have to press them to tell it because they don't want it to take away from the validity of the Sasquatch encounter. And they're afraid if they tell what really happened, people aren't going to believe them because it's just too far out there. And I think far too often that's the case. And we're sort of conditioning them to do that because some of the bigger organizations, like you said, refuse to take the stories, or they take out the parts that are more woo to just leave it the big dumb ape banging on a tree. And that's all it was. So I think it's important. I don't think that does anybody a service. I think it's actually one of the worst things you can possibly do, especially in a field like this, because you don't get the true and accurate picture of what people are experiencing. And who knows, if you had more information, you may be able to form a better hypothesis of what we're dealing with. So, So after that first experience that you had on the FLIR, I know you said you've had a couple of other experiences. What happened after that?
Well, after that, and I'm going to jump ahead because this is really key to the area I was in and my theory on impersonation, among other things. But my wife, she believes that I believe, and she's seen enough stuff sitting around here on my desk that she's going, oh my God. What is that? Well, that's a hand. That's a head. That's the Sasquatch looking in the deer cam. And so she agreed to go with me. I want to show you something because I just want you to know that I'm not doing this because I'm just eating up of this stuff. There's a method to my madness. So she agreed to go to an area with me that I use as a research area, one of several. And this was the same area where I saw that creature leading the expedition when it came around the curve. When it came around the curve, I was on a long forest trail that went along some pastures and stuff like this. And so I came to this area from another direction, investigating another site, and I had some issues there. So I take my wife, and we park in this conservation area, and it's about 100 yards down a fairly steep decline. It's very rocky and rutted, and they had the ravine blocked off, so nobody can go down there with any kind of vehicles. It's very treacherous, so you can only really walk down there. And so we backed into the entrance to the gate. There's a big steel gate that goes across there, so you can't drive. We backed up, and so I could see my SUV from where I was. We were walking down there, and she immediately got the creeps, that something's here, something's watching me. She was very uncomfortable. She was just not having a good time. And she's going, well, I need to get out of here. I don't like it here. I said, no. I want to show you the spot because this is a really cool spot. If you think you're having feelings now, check this out. So I kept walking down, and she got more and more agitated. And then I started getting that feeling of, there's something in the air, electrical charge, that something's watching me. The hair on the back of my neck was standing. I'm used to that, and I got it, and it happens to me often in this area. So we got about halfway down, and she was like, adamant, I'm getting out of here. I said, no. Look, we're just going down here to the bottom. Look, right down here at the bottom. And I pointed my light at the bottom where we were headed, and there was my car. I'm going, WTF? There's no, how'd my car get down there? And she goes, your car's not there. I said, yeah, look at it. It's right there. I could see the tail lights. And so I looked back up where I knew we had parked it. I said, look, it's not there. And she looked up. She goes, the car's there. It's right there. I'm looking right at it. I said, I'm looking at it down here at the bottom. And it's there. There's no way to get down there. How did my car get down there and it's not back up where we went? So I went through that twice. And I saw it where it wasn't. And she was getting creeped out and had this weird feeling that, something was going to happen and she was being watched. And the typical heebie-jeebie thing, And so I said, okay, we'll go back. But the car is down here, and I shined it back where I was seeing it. It wasn't there. I shined my light back up to where I had parked it in the first place. There it was. So there's two of us, in my opinion, being affected by infrasound or some other type of interference with our brain waves, where I was seeing my car somewhere where it obviously could not have been, and she was being affected by the feeling of something oppressive being in the area. And I was getting that, but it doesn't affect me. So we were both having two different effects within a couple of feet of each other from what I think was the same source, and it was infrasound. It was just the strangest thing, and I'm used to this stuff. So I'm sitting there going, I'm a big boy. I know what I'm doing. This is crazy. How did I see my car somewhere where it wasn't, and it couldn't have been anyway if we could have gotten there? There's no way. And I looked twice, and it was there. Then the third time, it was back where it was. And I think something was maybe not wanting us there. I think the creatures down there, I think they kind of know who I am. They know what I'm about. I've experienced several things in this area before, probably 3 or 4 things. So it was just odd that, and Ron Moorhead had the same thing happen at the Sierra camp, where they heard these creatures and they were bothering them to the point where they all huddled back into their structure they had. The big giant logs that were chained to a tree, and that was where they hid, and that was their shelter from the elements. Well, then they hear their camp being destroyed. I don't know if you read that part or heard it, but they listened to these creatures growling and grunting and picking up these 55-gallon oil drums they use to store firewood and food when they're not there, so that when they get there, they have some supplies. They heard the entire camp, the kitchen, everything being totally destroyed, all their dishes, everything. Well, after all the noise was over, they went out. Nothing had happened. But they were obviously 3 or 4 of them together hearing the complete destruction of their camp outside of their shelter. Yet when they walked outside an hour later, nothing had happened.
Yeah, Ron and I talked about that when I had him on the show, and that's one of those things where, like, how do you explain that, right? You're having this experience. It's not just you. It's not hallucinations. It's not a mass hallucination with 3 or 4 guys that are hearing this. So, and that was his only explanation, was it was some sort of infrasound or,
Yeah.
Ron even said something about he thought they might have been projecting it into their mind. Who knows what these things are capable of? I try not to come down on one camp or the other, because I try to be sort of a neutral party with the interviews that I do. And I listen to people's encounters and experiences. And of course I have my opinions, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's like you said, nobody knows. Nobody has one of these things in their garage studying it. And until that happens, it's all speculative, right? It's all about the anecdotal experiences and what the witnesses and people like yourself that are out there doing the research are experiencing. So I think it's fascinating, man. And I don't, the people, again, sort of going back to what we were talking about earlier, the people who don't have any room, I guess, for lack of a better word, for this kind of stuff when they're doing investigations into Bigfoot, I say it all the time. If you've already got your mind made up that it's just some big dumb ape running around in the woods, then why are you calling yourself a researcher? Why do you continue to go out night after night and week after week trying to get more sounds recorded or video or footprints? If you've already made up your mind, you're not a researcher. You're done. Just go home.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree with that. That's a good point, actually. And that's the conservative paradigm that about half our camp has, and it is divisive. And I think the government loves the division because we're fighting amongst ourselves without getting anything done. And look what they did with the UFO people. The UFO people have been reporting these UFOs since the 30s, 40s, 50s. They ridiculed them. All you're seeing is swamp gas, or you're seeing lights on Earth reflecting off the bellies of ducks and whatever, all the other garbage and stuff they came up with. These people, their lives were ruined. They're ridiculed. They don't exist. There's no such thing as flying saucers. You're out of your mind. And so what happened last year? Oh, yeah, we know. They're here. Here's those videos. Here's the Tic Tac videos. We've known about them for years. They exist. So what are you doing misinforming and chasing everybody off when you've known full well all along? It's going to be the same with Sasquatch. I think there's far more repercussions coming along with what and who these beings are than the UFO. I think people have believed in UFOs for years and years and years and years. I mean, they know that there's something out there, and you can't tell me it's swamp gas. So it's the same thing. I think they love that we're fighting, because if we're fighting, we're not getting anything done. And that's just the way they want it. That's more time they can sit on the secret until they have to come clean, Right. Technology and DNA will be the arrows that kill the giant, because those are the two things that are virtually unmistakable. The DNA, there's some really good DNA studies now that'll never see the light of day because we don't have enough letters by our name, and part of my book and the one I'm writing now is we need to create our own science. We have to have our own science, because science as we know it, it's a joke. They have no interest. They can tell us how guinea pigs breed and how you make electricity, but they can't explain, the Sasquatch. They don't want to, I don't think they want to. They don't even know what to do, where to start. Basically, I don't think they want to.
I agree with that. I agree. And I've talked to people about the DNA evidence. That was one of the questions that I asked Dr. Meldrum when I had him on the show was, What about the DNA evidence? What do you think about what's out there currently, what's been done, what's been found, and do you think DNA is going to be enough to prove that Sasquatch exists? And his answer was very scientific. It was, there's never been a novel species that's actually been proven without having the full sequence of DNA to say, yes, this actually exists, because without the full picture, you don't get the information that you need. And it's sort of like a computer. It's bad information in, you get bad information out as far as data is concerned, right? So, and it's very difficult with DNA because DNA is very expensive, and one of the analogies that we talked about was sort of like an advents calendar, right? If you've got 100 windows that you can open and got all these sequences in these 100 windows, well, if you've only got the money to open 10, what are the chances of those being one of those being the one that you need? And without being able to open all 100 windows, it's going to be very difficult to prove. People get upset and they challenge me all the time for people I have on the show talking about DNA. Well, Meldrum knows that DNA has proven this. He just won't say it. Melba Ketchum proved this with her study. Well, well, everybody's got an opinion on that, but
they've run her out of town. I feel really bad for her. She's been treated, very, very unfairly, and I haven't read all of her reports, but she's close enough to getting going what's going. But it's not. It's been peer reviewed, and all the peer reviews are not accepted. Her results are not accepted. She just hadn't got a fair shake, And but anybody who's involved in this will know that it is 50% human female, and the other 50% is unknown hominid. Well, what do you do with that? If there's an unknown hominid, then we don't know what it is because we don't have a type specimen, so therefore it doesn't exist.
Right.
Because even if it's the DNA that says it's an unknown hominid contributor, we don't have a type specimen. So, nana nana boo boo, it doesn't exist. And I can protect my professorship and my tenure and keep all the letters behind my name and my good standing, and I don't have to risk anything. It takes somebody with some guts to put themselves in a spot where they should say something, and it's just going to happen because someone's going to get tired of sitting on this and get tired of all the baloney, and it'll have to be the government giving them the whistle to not blow it anymore. We're going to put this out there, and this is what we have. Now you tell me why it's wrong instead of telling me why you're right. Tell me why my stuff is wrong and your stuff is right, and that'll be the fight. I'd love to have a ringside seat for that. I think I will, actually.
So you've kind of walked us through at least a couple of your experiences. What else have you personally experienced in research that's been compelling or something that you really believe that was an encounter with Sasquatch?
Well, the incident that I just described was very, very telling. I mean, I'm a lucid person, and I know what I was seeing, and it was not where it was supposed to be. So I was altered somehow. In the same area, probably 3 miles, and this was about 2018, I believe. I think it was 2018. Same area, but about 3 or 4 miles off from where I took my wife. And myself and my squatching partner here in Missouri and another person, we went to the river, and it's the Burnt River here in Missouri. And we went to an area where we had reports before, and I'd had 2 Class A sightings published within a mile of this area, and both by the same person and his family. And so it's crazy active. So we got there about 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, and this is the point where the river becomes a circle. It goes underneath the highway. You can literally walk off the highway, and the shoulder is a foot below the highway, and it's a river. And we walked out into the middle of the river where there was a big sandbar. So myself and this other person were sitting about 20 feet apart from each other. My partner was on the other side of the river, and he was probably 60, 70 feet away, and he had no thermal gear. We heard something, and I didn't. Scanning the woods with my thermal camera, and I quit recording because I was just getting too many fox and deer. And I was like, okay, I'll turn it on when I see something. But we were sitting there, we heard something, and my partner radioed, because we use two-way radio, and he said, I'm seeing something coming at me. It's like a bush or a big black something. It looks like it's walking toward me. I said, where is it? And he said, well, it's coming out of the woods right by you guys. And it looks like a bush that's just walking toward me. And then he stopped and said, I think it's coming right at me. And so I looked and I shined my camera back into the woods behind us. I couldn't see anything. And he got up, and then we were both sitting down. So I stood up. When I stood up, my feet slipped because we're on these big river rocks, nice big rocks that are tumbled smooth and everything. And it made a noise. And I heard a noise again. I looked to my left, and 25 or 30 feet away was this Sasquatch. I mean, it was very short and very round. It was almost like a bowling ball with arms and legs. It wasn't the tall, lean, badass looking 8 foot tall. It was about 5.5, 6 foot. And it just looked like it had just eaten itself into like a sumo wrestler shape or something. It was just weird. And I stood up and I was looking at it. And then Brian, my partner, he gets up and he runs. He's heading for the car. And the person sitting next to me, I'm saying, don't move. There's a Sasquatch right behind you. And I stood up all the way. And at that point, the creature looked at him, it looked back at me, it looked at Brian, my partner, who was moving away, it looked back toward the woods, turned around, and walked back into the woods calmly as if nothing was going on. I don't think it saw us sitting there because we were sitting there perfectly quiet in the dark. It's just like that other one. It came around the corner, and it was there, and it was massive. I mean, it was probably, I would say 400 or 500 pounds, and probably not any taller than I am. I'm 6'2", but it was humongous. And he told me after we had seen that thing that he thought he saw something walk in front of my car. My car was parked across the highway, and he saw it walk in front of my car. And the reason he knows he saw it is because I had a dash cam that I keep on in my car. So the light went out for just a second as it walked in front of my car on the side. It walked on the driver's side, and it passed the car, and the light went out and it came right back on. And then he thinks it crossed the highway, came into the woods behind us, and was coming up that way. He thinks it saw Brian and was coming at him like he might be a food source or something, or just curious. That lasted about 25, 30 seconds. It was just mind-blowing, and the person who was with us they never saw it because I had the camera. Brian had a camera, but it wasn't a thermal camera. It was just a night vision. It wasn't thermal, so all he got was kind of a blob because it was moving, and it was making him quite uneasy. And so, but this is an area, like I said, that would happen in 2017 or 18, and that did it for the person that was with me and Brian, because it was like right there in front of them. I mean, we're all standing right there or sitting right there. It was an amazing event. We all got in the car later. We were just sitting there in stunned silence going, did that just really happen? Yes, it did. It did. It just really did. That's not like that's pretty much like a typical night vision type sighting. It didn't have any paranormal. It didn't have any metaphysical aspects to it, but it was just a clear and obvious creature standing right there, and it calmly walked back in. So I've had other esoteric things happen, other things that have spoken to me. I've heard the voice, I've heard voices, I've heard chatter, all that kind of stuff. I've been paralyzed in my sleep before, stuff of that nature. So, but that's like real life stuff. And, it just tells me that I'm on the right track and I'm not looking back,
So after all your years of research, you've been out in the woods, you've had these experiences. Let's talk about the evidence for a second. Let's talk about technology. And you mentioned earlier, you think that DNA and technology are going to be what solves this thing and puts the arrow in the giant, right? Mm-hmm. Since the Patterson-Gimlin film in 1967, right, that's probably the biggest example of finding conclusive proof that Sasquatch exists, if you believe that film is genuine. Okay?
Yeah,
so
I believe it is.
I was going to ask, that was one of the questions I wanted to ask. If you believe that is genuine and it stood the test of time, is there any other compelling evidence outside of that you've seen since that film that points you, and you can, in your opinion, say this is conclusive evidence that this is a Sasquatch, this is real, and these things exist? Let's sort of start with the Patterson-Gimlin film and why you think that it is a legitimate piece of evidence, and then sort of go from there.
Okay. Well, the technology to hoax something like that just did not exist back then. And this was shot on, 16 millimeter film. I mean, that's not alterable unless you do some incredibly tasty and very difficult splicing. So the technology to make a suit of that nature with pendulous breasts and rippling muscles and maybe even apparently a herniated muscle on the right leg. That technology to do that just didn't exist. It barely exists now, and with the technology that exists to make fake videos, also the ability to determine if it's fake or not. I have a couple of programs I run films through and photo to see if they've been tampered with, and they're pretty good programs. So I think it stood the test of time. They've done the recreation. They've done the body double. They're trying to get a guy in a suit. They've got a sprinter, and they're doing the measurement with the points of light on a screen, and it's just not possible to have faked that back then. The other film that I like, and people are kind of on the fence, is the Paul Freeman film out of Washington. He was a conservation agent working for the state of Washington. And I've got one of his footprints hanging on my wall here in my office. I've also got the Patterson film. I've got the Patterson footprint here in my office as well. And I've got an 18-inch print here on my wall I took myself. So, you can't fake that stuff, I've got a handprint here that has dermal ridges, and my partner took that here in Kansas City, Missouri, about 2 years ago. Cliff Berkman has a copy of that print in his private collection, and he's verified it. Police DNA lab confirmed that it is a real print. It has dermal ridges all over it. And I had a connection at the time that we got it run through a lab, police lab here, and it is 13 inches from the base of the palm to the tip of the middle finger. And it's nothing other than a big ass handprint. It's just a big print. And when we got it cast, I dusted it for print. I carry a DNA kit at all times, just in case. You never know. And so I have a print casting kit. So we dusted it for prints after it was cast. And all these, and it's in the book, but all the dermal ridges popped up on this thing. And when they run my connection at the police lab, when they run it through the crime lab, they have to. It's not an option. If you bring a piece of evidence in, it has to be run through the national database, both federal, state, and local, to see if this is a wanted person. It was found, of course, to be not a wanted person. There's no Sasquatch wanted for any criminals, criminal activity. That was a good thing to know. But they said, I don't know what this is. I don't even want to know what it is. And don't bring these in here anymore. Because you have to log them in as a police officer. You have to log them in. So you have to explain where you got this print, why you think it is what it is. Well, it was kind of a backdoor deal. We were, getting a favor done, off the books, off the record. But anyway, so the Paul Freeman film, I think, is a good example. There's people that think it may be a hoax, and he hoaxed it, but he's got several good prints. If you're familiar with Paul Freeman footage?
Yes, I've seen it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you may or may not be on the fence with it. You may be, maybe you think it's fake or whatever, but it's the guy is just so down home, and, and Cliff Berkman thinks it's real, and I think it's real, and most people think it's real, and he'd been seeing them and interacting with them for years, So those are the two that are just standing the test of time. For me, there's all kinds of videos that nobody can prove they're fake or how they faked them if they do think they're fake. And so you have to kind of go, there's that one where the Sasquatch is throwing a tree at the road crew up in Canada. Have you seen that one where it throws a tree?
No, I haven't seen that.
Oh, yeah. The Thinker Thunker has it. That is something to watch. Sasquatch throwing a tree. It was a road crew was clearing a road, doing some road repairs on a highway or road in, I think it's British Columbia, but I know it's Canada. And this creature's getting all torqued off, and it picks up a tree. I think it uproots it. It picks it up and it throws it like a spear. And it goes, I forget how many feet. But it's a big tree. It's a sapling of as far as big trees go, it's a smaller tree. It's probably 6-8 inches across, but it clearly hurdles this tree, and it's not been proven to be fake. Check that one out. I don't know the name of it. I've got so many of those. I honestly, I take one look and I file them away, and I just quit looking at it because there's so many of them, and
yeah, it's easy to
10 or 12.
It's easy to go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So, as far as evidence is concerned, I know hoaxes are out there. There's video. It's easier now, like you said, with technology to fake videos. But, I think the Patterson Gimlin film did a couple of things. It really put the subject on the map, but it also set such a high bar for anybody who was trying to submit evidence after that fact that if the video's too good, it's faked. If it's not good enough, it's a blob squatch. So, and if it's in between, it's I just, it fascinates me. And I think there's some clear hoaxes out there, like Todd Standing, for example. I don't know where you are. I don't know how you feel about Todd Standing, but
I feel like you do. I can hear it in your voice. We're on the same page.
Yeah, I just I watched Discovering Bigfoot, and I see that, and I'm like, if that's not fake, that is close up HD quality video of Sasquatch. So,
and it looks just like
that Carter, that's exactly what happened to me. I watched Discovering Bigfoot for the first time recently, and I'm watching it and I'm just, jaw dropping. And I frankly watched it because of the late John Bennernagel. I wanted to see him on there. Jeff Meldrum, I wanted to see them on there. It was more about them than it was the Todd Standing part, I'll be quite honest with you. But I watched this, and I was intrigued by the video. I was like, wow. And here's the thing about hoaxes, and I don't know how you feel about this as a researcher, and you've got way more experience clearly than I do, but I feel that probably 95 to 98% of the hoaxers out there probably have some sort of experience. There's some videos and there's some things, and I even talked to Dr. Meldrum about his time there with Todd Standing. He had personal encounters. He had a situation where he saw Sasquatch on the hill right before he left the camp. So I know that Todd Standing has probably had numerous encounters with Sasquatch. It's just like you have this encounter and it's not good enough. You didn't get the proof, or it's not enough. So you just keep embellishing and pushing the envelope and pushing the envelope. And then everything you put out is fake. And I don't understand it, number one. And I think it does such a disservice to all the people that have genuine encounters out there, you know?
Yeah.
And if you've had genuine encounters, just talk about your genuine encounters. And if people believe you, they do. If they don't, they don't. I think that people end up just trying to make money off of the hoaxes. And it pisses me off,
Yeah.
frankly. It just pisses me off.
He's soiled the nest for research greatly with his stuff. It's tacky and self-serving, and it's just, you're making a mockery, and that kind of stuff sets us back years and years, or months and months, because if somebody else who wants some attention sees, oh, look what he's getting with that, then I can do that. Yeah, I've got better equipment. I can do, it sets us all back. And that is what the detractors who don't want this to come out love. The government, the paper companies, the lumber companies, they all know exactly what's going on, depending on who you talk to. There's crews that are put together to eradicate Sasquatch that are in the way of logging and stuff. And these clans that live on these, thousands and tens of thousands of acres, unspoiled land that no one sets foot on there, and they're cutting down their habitat. Well, they get in the way of the trucks. They do damage to the trucks. And so they got crews on horseback and whatever going up and out and killing them off, so to speak, if you believe some of that, and there's just so much evidence of that is going on and has been going on in the past. If even 10% is true, we're in trouble. We're doing a really bad thing out there. So there's a lot of hoaxers. It attracts the money grubbers and all that kind of stuff, And my whole thing is getting the stories from the people that supports all aspects of Sasquatch behavior, the meat and potato road crossing to the Sasquatch. I talked to a lady who saw a Sasquatch and it ran through her clothesline, and the clothesline passed through the body of the Sasquatch as it was running away from them at night. And she watched this because her husband had turned on the light. Something was going on back there. So how do you explain that? Was she tripping? She got the good stuff? What would make you see that? And here's the thing with what I've been researching on my second book is that with rare exception, you cannot be made to see something that is not there unless you have an outside stimulus, unless you are paranoid schizophrenic or schizophrenic. You can hallucinate things because you have a chemical imbalance in your brain, and they can give you drugs to take care of that. But you cannot see something that is not there if you have normal mental health. There are a few very rare exceptions, like with Parkinson's, dementia, and Alzheimer's patients can possibly see things, And, I'm a clear-headed guy. I'm not a doper. And my wife and I were standing right next to each other, and I was seeing something that wasn't there. My car was somewhere else. Ron Moorhead was hearing them destroy his camp. Is he hallucinating, or him and his 2 or 3 other partners, crazy lunatics? They're high on drugs up in the mountains? No. So there's something going on. See, there's something going on. You can't, you can't tell me that there isn't. You can tell me, I'm just not going to believe you, but I'm trying to get these people that are having these events and get it out. And this next book's going to have, oh my gosh, some of the people I'm talking to now, oh my goodness, this stuff is just beyond belief. It's just amazing.
Well, I can't wait for the book, that's for sure. And it's so fascinating to me when I started doing the show that I'm a fledgling podcaster, right? I'm trying to meet people and get people on the show to tell their encounter stories. And I go into Facebook groups. And just to get into the Facebook groups, you have to believe what they believe or you don't get in. There's no conflicting opinions allowed, basically. You have to answer these questionnaires to get into the groups just to talk to people about their encounters or whatever. And I just found that fascinating that there's so much division in the community, quote unquote, Bigfoot community. I don't really think there's much of a community at all, frankly, but it just amazed me that I'm talking about a cryptozoological, basically novel species on Facebook. And if I believe that Bigfoot is flesh and blood, I can't get in this group. Or if I believe that it's anything other than flesh and blood, I can't be in that group, And it just fascinates me. And I don't know if it's just human nature or if it's some of, like you've talked about, the government has made people believe certain things for so many years about these things. It's just sort of evolved into what it is, and then you have some of these groups that, anything goes pretty much as long as you're respectful. And I'm glad of that, but it's so difficult to get people's stories out there because frankly, sometimes you just can't get to them. People put up these walls and blockade themselves off. And I'm glad to know that there are other people out there like you that are interviewing these people and taking down what they're saying and putting it out there as it is for people to digest, because I don't think you're forming any opinions of your own, but you're taking what these people are seeing and you're putting it out there and letting people say, here's the entire story. This is what this person said they experienced, and then they can form their own conclusions and their own hypotheses based on the whole of the evidence, not just what somebody wants you to hear. And I think that's a great thing. What are some of the more compelling encounters that you've experienced over the years from people that you've interviewed, things that you truly believed happened, and there's some of the more compelling evidence-based stories and encounters?
Well, I'm interviewing a guy now. He lives in British Columbia, and he got my name off of a podcast. And I'm still vetting his story, but I believe it to be true so far. He's been having experiences for 40 years, regular, ongoing, unless he just tells him that he wants to be left alone. And the story I'm going to tell you is far out, but it makes sense if you're living the life he's living and he's experiencing these creatures on a day-to-day basis. The creature, he lives alone up in about a 40 by 40 cabin up in the middle of absolutely nowhere in BC, Canada. This one creature, I tell you what, the creature, have you seen the cover of my book?
Yes, I have. I'm looking at it right now.
That creature was taken from an interview that he did, and it was drawn by Sibylla Irwin. You know Sibylla? You know who she is?
I'm not familiar now.
She is one of the premier sketch artists for Bigfoot encounters. She drew this. This was a description of the creature that has been coming to him on and off for 40 years. And I didn't know that when I picked the book, the cover. I've known Sibylla for a while, and so I was going through her stuff, and she did all the artwork in my book. And I saw that picture, and it was brand new. I was going, God, that's awesome. It looks like a photograph. This is the creature that's coming and going. at will in this guy's house. It appears, it disappears, it comes through the wall or just appears in the house, and he has no idea how it's getting there. It has shown him how it morphs and dematerializes. And he was showing him one night, and he said, "How did you do that?" "I will show you again." And so it backs up and starts to show him, and it's walking, but it's gliding, and its legs are moving, but the feet are not. And it's sort of like you're getting a bad TV signal, you know, the like if you had rabbit ears from, you know, the bad antenna, and the vision of this creature was kind of fading in and out while he's watching it, and it's showing him how he does it. And he's telling me this matter-of-factly, and we've talked about it 2 or 3 times, and he's told me the same exact story every time. And one time in the cabin, his buddy called him up and said, "Hey, I've got a girl I want you to meet." And so he said, "Well, okay, bring some food and beer, and let's, you know, bring your girlfriend over and her friend." And it's kind of a blind date. So they came over there, and there was 2 creatures. Only he could see them. And this is where it's getting far out here. There's 2 creatures. There's the creature from the cover of the book, and then there's a female, Sasquatch, younger female. And when the girl that he's getting fixed up with looks like he's sort of kind of, you know, they're kind of hitting it off, the female creature that only he can see is standing right in front of her and snapping a twig, a branch. So it's making this loud crack. And everybody in the house is looking around. Where's that noise coming from? And nobody else is seeing this but him. And this female Sasquatch is getting, he thinks, jealous because the female Sasquatch was brought by the big Sasquatch as a date or a mate for him. And it just happened to pop up when this guy showed up with his girlfriend and her friend that he was trying to set her up with. And so they keep hearing this twig snapping, branches snapping, that's just crack, crack, crack. And they said, "We're out of here." And so his friend and the 2 women, they packed up their stuff and got out and left. And the Sasquatch just walked back out of the house, through the wall, out onto his deck. He could see the deck lumber, the timbers on his deck sagging under the weight of these 2 creatures. The big one is probably 10 feet, about 900 pounds. And what do you do with that? Are you needing attention that bad you're going to make this up, or is this really going on? And he's been on Sasquatch Chronicles. I've got him in touch now with Ron Moorhead because he has heard some of the exact words in his house that Ron has on the Sierra Sounds. I just hooked them up last week. They've been communicating back and forth. I don't know what's going on with them. But what do you do with that? I mean, is that just incredible, or is it the greatest hoax of all time, or one of the greatest? You know, I mean, he's just matter of fact, and he goes into great detail, you know, and it's blowing me away. And he, you know, I'm going to put some of his stories in my book if I can, you know, make sure that, you know, it's all valid, you know, valid stuff. I don't want to, you know, just put it there because he said it, but he's saying that it mirrors other people. These people don't know each other. They don't want any money. They don't want anything. Are there like 50,000 people walking across the North American continent that are just lunatics and we just don't know it yet? They're undiagnosed. Or are they actually having these experiences? I mean, you can only go 2 ways with it, you know?
Right.
And he's just very matter of fact, you know? I mean, it's just like, oh, here's another story. And here's another story. I can't keep him on track. It's been going on since he was 12 years old. you know?
Yeah, it's very difficult as someone who does these interviews on the show, and I have people on it. I had Dave on several shows back. He was probably one of the first 2 or 3 shows that I put out for the podcast. Dave was out there, right? He had some very out there theories, and he was telling me about how he knew that the male Sasquatch that were around his property hunted with domesticated coyotes. Each male Sasquatch used 4 to 5 coyotes to hunt with when they were hunting prey. And I mean, how do you know that? How do you come up with that? I mean, is that embellishment? Is it he's just making these things up? Is it true? I don't know. I just put it out there, and the more I look back, and I've talked to more people and had more interview experience since that show, and I look back and I hear some of the things that he said, and it kind of makes sense. Because he's telling me at the time some of these far-fetched stories that, they're hanging around his house. He's arm lengths away from a female Sasquatch, trying to feed her a treat. He feeds them Tootsie Pops, and I'm like, now who's to say that that's not true? I don't know. I just put the information out there and let people digest it. But some of the more far out stories are more difficult for people to stomach, I think, because it's easier to check a box, right? It's just a big ape in the woods, and that's pretty much, even though it's hard for people to grasp at times, I think it's a lot easier to wrap your brain around than it being some sort of interdimensional being that's able to mind speak, or to make you hallucinate with infrasound or whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, it's like I always say, you got to keep an open mind. And as long as you do that, and listen to people's stories, and I've got a pretty good gut instinct. I was in law enforcement for 16 years. So I kind of know if somebody's bullshitting me or not, and clearly after all the years of your research and hearing people's stories, your BS meter has to be on point, because you don't want to put something out there that's going to turn around and make you look like a fool, right? So if I believe that person, then there's got to be some validity to it somewhere.
Yeah. Well, here's a point I make, and I'm going to make it again in this book, is that we are taught from the age of 4 or 5 when we enter the education system what is what and what is not. So you go back only 10 generations, that's 250 years. 250 years of disinformation gets us into the 1800s, when the mysterious airships and the UFOs were starting to pop up. The thing is, we are taught, the teachers who taught the teachers who taught the teachers who taught the teachers who taught the teachers, go on back 10 generations, we're all fed misinformation, and what they want you, they being the government and whomever else, they want you to perceive the world as. And if that is your only knowledge base from the day you're born until you're 18 and get out of high school, well, UFOs don't exist. There's no apes in North America, never has been, never will be. These people are crazy and blah, 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 blah. Well, then when you do run across it, you're like, well, that must have been a guy in a ghillie suit. That must have been a bear. That must have been, who knows, a really tall guy that's, walking in the woods barefoot. I mean, your mind is going to tell you, because you've already been conditioned to believe a certain way, and you don't even know that it's right or wrong. It's just, well, there's no apes in North America, so that must not be true. And so you have to try to, convince yourself. And if you even really care about it, you just go, well, it must have been a bear, and you go on about your business. You don't care. But if you're starting to think, you go, well, why do they tell us that's, not true? And now they say the UFOs don't exist, and now they do exist. Well, people are going to start going, maybe this isn't a meat and potato world. What, science will admit to at least 4 dimensions, and they say up to 11 and possibly 21 dimensions. So how do we know that there's not fabrics of time that people can slip in and out of? Skinwalker Ranch is another example. But we're taught how to believe and what to believe, And that's the way it is. All your books, everything is just that way. And so you're obviously going to poo-poo it. The first time you see or hear about it, oh, that's baloney. That's a guy in a suit. That's a Patterson Gimlin. That's a guy in a suit. Why? Well, because there's no apes in North America. It's just, So you have to try to convince yourself. And if you're just so busy with life and all that, you just don't think about it one way or the other. You move on to something else. You don't really care about it, and you move on. So there's people like myself and you that do care about it and want to get to the bottom of it. So I put it all out there because we don't know. We're taught how to believe, and half of what people who are in the dumb ape camp is they're believers of what they were taught and believe, and they have no open mind. And open mind doesn't mean you believe it. It means you consider it. It's two different things. You don't have to believe it, but you better consider it because something's going on and we're not privy to it. So that's my Cliff Notes version of how I believe we're brainwashed. It may or may not be innocent, but we're taught how to believe, and then your parents have been taught, so they're going to enforce that belief system, and then biblically you're brought up a certain way, and so that's going to be reinforced, and so it's all information. Half of it's baloney, and it may be innocently baloney, but they're not rewriting the textbooks the last time I checked as far as metaphysical and, spiritual type beings. It's too Star Trek-y.
Right.
Nobody wants to swallow that. It's just, like I said, and it doesn't mean, and I've ostracized some people because I have an open mind, and especially in BFRO, I don't know how much longer I'll be with them actually, but you have to have we've got 2 cars up on Mars right now running around taking pictures. We can't prove or disprove there's a creature on Earth. And we're 250 million miles away on a planet doing stuff that was space age and science fiction 50 years ago. So there's something wrong with the whole picture, and I'm trying to pop a hole in it and just tell people, listen to these people that have things going on because they're telling you something. And if you can just, you have to, I talk to people, like you said, my BS meter does go off sometimes, not a lot, but it goes off. I can read embellishment, and I ask people the same question 4 or 5 times differently each time, and then I get the same answer. I'm kind of good with what they're telling me. So it's a crazy world, man. It's a crazy world. It's fascinating because this stuff is going on. It's just fascinating, and not everybody needs attention that bad. Most of these people, I think, are telling the truth, or the truth as they believe it, perceive it. Not something they're just wanting to tell you because, hey, I got my 15 minutes last night.
Right. I think I always say this. If you take 100% of just the Sasquatch encounters alone in our country, right? Let's just throw out all the other continents. Let's just say our continent here, United States of America, lower 48, people have these encounters. If you take 100% of those and say 85% of them are misidentification, right? It's a bear. It's some other known animal. You take away, okay, that's 85%. 10% of those people are just lying. They just made it up. They're just like, I want my 15 minutes of fame. I want to tell people that I saw this mythical novel species and I'm going to make up stories. Well, what about the 5%? They didn't make it up. It's not a misidentification. What did they see? And if you just deal with that small amount of the reports, there's got to be something more to the subject than everybody that's ever said they saw a Sasquatch is lying or crazy or a hoaxer, right? So there's got to be more to it. And I think that's a great place to end on what you said earlier. You don't have to believe it, but you damn well need to consider it. Whatever these people are saying, you got to consider everything. So.
Yeah, that's true. That's my Brussels sprouts theory in the book. You don't have to eat them, but put them on your plate, spread them around so it looks like you're eating them, and think about eating them, but put them on the plate. Consider it.
Absolutely.
And you can talk it. It just makes common sense. You got to have an open mind. This is the 21st century. It's not 1997 anymore. It's not 1950 anymore.
Yep. I agree, man.
Crazy.
Well, the first book is called Sasquatch Evidence of an Enigma. Carter Buschardt, I thank you so much for your time, man. I really appreciate you coming on the show. It's been fascinating. We've got to have you back for a round 2 and talk more about the second book.
Absolutely, Brian. Well, whenever, you got my number and you got my email, so just we'll do it. I'm probably going to be about 3 or 4 months out on the book. I think the way I'm going, 3 months minimum. I might get lucky and get real quick on it, but it's just as I'm interviewing people, there's more and more stuff. I'm going, oh my God, maybe I'll take that story out and put this one in. I'll just make it. It's crazy. It's like Christmas all the time right now. It's awesome.
I can only imagine. Well, thanks a lot for coming on the show, man. I can't thank you enough.
All right, we'll talk later, man.
And that's it for tonight's show, folks. Thank you so much for being with us. Remember, if you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. You get me at brian@sasquatchodyssey.net. Have a great night, and we'll see you guys next week.